on? I'm Drew.
And I'm Tony.
And welcome to another episode of Back for Our Future, the podcast that goes back to help us learn about our future and yours. This episode is part 2. If you haven't heard the first one, you might want to go back one episode. This is part 2 of our 2-part series on the most important film of all time, So I Married an Axe Murderer. The previous episode, we talked about the soundtrack and the music and how important it was to us. On this episode, we're talking all about the movie. Tony, is there anything you want to say before we kick it off?
No, but just strap yourself in for a fun ride because we got a lot of great stories to tell you.
Okay, here we go. So I think iconically, we have the soundtrack. Obviously, we've talked in length about it because it was that important, and it really does tie, as I mentioned and Tony has mentioned, it ties so well to the movie. I also got to talk about the fact of where we saw this, because this theater was not necessarily considered the top theater in the area.
I'm gonna put a photo. I'll put photos that we got. Any of the photos we got up when we do this episode. But yeah, I mean it's Village 6. It's one of the theaters that kind of it bookends Bel Air Mall. There's Bel Air Cinema 2 on the one side, and then there's this one that's in a strip mall. It's on the other side. It's a really cool looking theater for being what it is. It's got a really cool, it may be perfect. It may have been the perfect spot for this movie to play, actually, because of it being kind of with the 70s feel in the film, some of it, and, with some of the music and stuff like that. And then you've got this theater that's very alternative. It was the only theater in Mobile that had, that was playing. They had, their screening room, and they would play indie films and stuff like that. So the fact that this movie played there, it was the only theater. So even though we had Carmike 10 next to us, for whatever reason, this movie was not playing at Carmike 10. It was only playing at Village 6. So we had to go down to the mall and go to Village 6.
The thing I think, to your point about the way this place looked, I also think that I think So I Married would have had an impact on us either way, but I do believe that seeing it at Village 6 not only adds to the mystique of seeing it, but I think it added to the entire experience overall. And I think it's also what helped us, that made us fall into it of our own, because Village 6 was not, for me, I'm not going to speak for you, but for me, it was not our parents' theater. It was the indie theater. It was the rogue theater. It was the rebel theater. It was off the beaten path. It wasn't necessarily the cleanest of theaters. It was dated.
It was older.
But it was ours. It felt like ours.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I agree with you.
And there was nothing corporate about it. So in this era of the 90s where we're starting to get into the grunge and alternative it was an alternative theater. That's exactly the word I should have said. It's an alternative theater. It was the alternative to Winsong. You have this monstrosity of a building, which is we love very much, but it is a very cookie cutter effect. Yeah. And then you go to this theater, which is reminiscent of the old days. I remember the seats in there, dude. They were the fold down. I think they were wooden maybe even, but they were like the fold down chairs. They were not necessarily super cinema chairs, if I remember correctly.
No, it was very much an old school theater. It was great. I mean, it was one of the last of the old school theaters, man. Quite honestly, it's one of the last ones that I would experience, and it was pretty remarkable. I mean, it was pretty remarkable. It was a sad day when they tore that thing out years later, and I'm grateful to have gotten to see this film with you there. No doubt about it. Now, we drag along a couple of our buddies.
So I don't remember who went with us to see this. I didn't remember who went.
So your cousin's with us.
Okay, Wade. Right.
And Sam Robinson.
Oh, okay. So Sam and Wade. So just to preface this, because
we're all together pretty much this whole summer.
Yeah, yeah.
We hang out with these guys pretty much the whole summer. This is kind of the group. I mean, we're not always together, but because Sam lives a little bit, he's not right next to us, we're next to each other and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it was all those guys.
Yeah. So people understand, I technically am I think I've talked about it before, but just to preface it. So technically I'm an only child, but I grew up very close to my cousins. One of them's older, one of them's younger. The older girl was obviously an older girl in high school she could give two craps what was going on in my life. I mean, I get it. I do. My time will come when my daughters are going to be that way. But her younger brother, Wade, he's 2 years younger than me. So he's 4 years younger than Tony. Is that right? 3 years younger, whatever.
Yeah, he's a
We
few.
were all,
I know that.
yeah. He's two under me, but we were all very, very, very close. Wade, as the little guy, got to hang with the big dudes all the time, and my grandmother would bust our balls about it. Like, you guys got to stop leaving him out. Like, because I didn't have a little brother, I didn't think about it, but we weren't leaving him out. He got to do anything I did, he did. And it was until he found his own way, which, he got 16, 17, he became his own person. But in that time, he was shaped a lot by the antics of his two, quote, older brothers, Tony and Drew, and the malarkey that we did.
You're right.
So it's interesting. I did not remember them seeing it. Did they like it as much as we did?
No, they did not like it as much as we did. As a matter of fact, Sam was like, it's good. It's okay. It's not bad. It's that kind of thing. It was like, oh, yeah, that's all right. Of course, they hadn't done all the stuff that we had done at this point, listened to all the soundtrack and this whole stuff, and got in our head that this was going to be great. And Wade was cool. He liked it. I mean, I don't know how he feels about this today. I don't talk to him nearly as much. And I haven't talked to Sam in many years. But I mean, Sam was like, it's okay. It's not, it's not the end all be all. But Wade was like, it's cool. I mean, I don't know if he said that because we loved it so much, but I mean, he liked it better than Sam did at the time.
It's interesting because Wade a lot of it probably went over his head because of dating and stuff like that. He was young. He would have been 12 or 13. And then Sam, there's stories about Sam we'll never tell on this show. They just won't be told. Certainly now, Sam has a wonderful career. I believe he's still in the military as a warrant officer. He flies helicopters. He's a bad dude. Thank you for your service, Sam, if you hear this, but we won't tell the stories.
He's always been a good dude. He's a nice guy.
He's a great guy. Good guy.
And Wade is a great guy. I mean, I love both those guys. So, I mean,
Wade ended up in the business. I mean, he's in the art direction side of advertising, but he's in the business.
I texted with him a little bit ago, several months ago, but I haven't talked to him in a bit. But yeah, I mean, they didn't enjoy it nearly as much as we did. But we were all hanging out in 1983 together, and so it was kind of a fun thing. And we would have a sleepover that week as well.
Oh boy!
Now
that was a big thing. That was a big thing for us. We were very much into having like four of us would all hang out, 3 or 4 of us, whatever it was, and we would all just because just like now, like I watch my kids do it, but like that you stay up late and you eat snacks. Yeah, sleepovers. I mean, I
try to get my friends to do it now. In my 40s.
I'm too old, man. I would gladly. We have a trip coming up. This episode will drop somewhere during the trip, I think. Yeah. And we've laughed about it because Tony and I are going on a boys' trip, and we had to upgrade our tickets to give us air conditioning and shade.
Old guy shame.
Yeah, listen, man. I know when I'm tired. You know me. I'll fall asleep at the drop. I would fall asleep mid-sentence. Doesn't bother me.
No, but we had a sleepover. It was at your house.
Okay.
Do you remember anything about this sleepover?
Barely. I just remember the name. I remember the nickname of it. So, I want to even say we were woken up by my grandfather at the end of it.
You're right. You're right. But there's a reason why we end up there. So, so here's what happened. We were all 4 of us decided to have a sleepover at your house. Now, we didn't always have the sleepovers at your house. A lot of times we will have the sleepovers at my house. But this is one that we did have at your house. We all got sleeping bags and stuff and camped out down in front of your television in your living room.
Okay.
Okay, so it's not there are no beds there. It's just couch, and it's so we all formed this little area where all 4 of us could sleep on the floor in this living room where there was a TV and stuff like that. And we started. It's dark down there. It's pretty dark down there, and so we started talking and carrying on young teens do, and started really hyping ourselves up about stupid stuff. Like we would talk about the Bloody Mary thing, all the
Oh yeah.
stupid, all the stupid legends and urban legends and stuff. Bloody Mary, Candyman's out at this point. I mean, like
Right.
stuff's out, like, and all the ghost stories. I mean, we're four dudes, but it didn't stop us from being quite afraid. By the time we really had psyched ourselves up pretty badly at this point. And and I remember I'm like, man, like what if that's true? What if Bloody Mary is true? You know, and like I mean, I'm 16. I don't know why it was a big deal, but it was. I'm a pretty tough guy. I'm a pretty tough guy, and you are too. And Sam obviously is too. And Wade's much younger than all of us, but still. And I remember Sam. I vividly remember this comment. He says, and he was taller than us. We're all kind of Drew and Wade. We're all kind of Wade's gotten a little taller now, but we're all kind of average height type
Yep.
guys. And Sam was taller than us. He was a little bit more tall on the taller side. And he goes, I don't care if I'm taller or bigger than you guys. He said, if somebody jumps out or comes after us while we're down here, I'm the first one out the door. I'm not going to protect you at all. And I was like, thanks, dude. And so we had psyched ourselves up so much. And by the way, we will call this the satanic sleepover. We're
Of
not.
course we did.
We called this the satanic sleepover, and that's the nickname we've given it over the years. We psyched ourselves up so much that we. Now remember, the downstairs living room is in a very open space.
Yep.
This
Yep.
is what we were trying to avoid. So we were like, oh my God, we got to go somewhere else where we're like safer. So we go up into your like little game room area, which is like
Yep.
you go upstairs. There's some rooms on the left, and you were down on your room was down on the end to the
Yep.
right. We didn't go there where there was like beds and stuff like that. We went into the little game room where there's like a lot of floor space, and we could lock the doors
Right.
on all the sides of us.
Right.
Super secure, and
Right.
in our absolute terror. And so we slept on the floor in this room. And that's when we wake up with your granddad standing over us the next morning saying, hey, wake up, you little turds. It's like, that was hilarious, man.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
like, hey, little guys, wake up. It was so funny, man.
He was not one for letting anyone sleep in.
I
Ever.
think you had to go shrimping, didn't you, that day? Or no? No, I don't think
Oh,
you
if
did.
I
Over.
no, because that would have been like 3 a.m. That would
Yeah,
have been
no.
like 3 a.m.
He was just over that day. He was just over for like breakfast or something.
Yeah, but he did not care. He World War II veteran, salty as all get out. He was a big guy too. He's a big dude, and he would come. He would. I just remember. I remember. I don't remember that part. I remember the satanic sleep. I remember scaring ourselves to a point of like absolute. I mean, it was almost terror is the only word. We worked ourselves into a frenzy.
Right.
But him waking us up was like, get up. I mean, that's how he would talk. He was just a hard man. And I will forever remember him. He did that to me probably 3 or 4 times. He would just, didn't matter what I was doing. There was no privacy. That dude would just walk in there. Not like I was doing anything bad, but like he would just walk in there and just get out of bed, boy. I mean, he was hard nosed about it.
He was kind of
Yeah,
laughing at us, and he was always a really nice guy. He was always really nice to me. But he was a great guy. That was a really rude awakening.
Oh, after that night? Because I don't think we slept well. So like after that night, it's just.
And yeah, we didn't want to wake up, and that was kind of funny. It was fun. But that's part of the lure of that movie because it happened that same like evening, like within the day of each other.
The crazy thing about this movie is that obviously we've got a lot of fond memories, the soundtrack, there's so much to it, but there's also an interesting side that Tony experiences, which is the fact that of all my friends on the planet Earth, He's the only person I know that has actually seen the same movie in theaters. I don't even know how many times. It must have been, you must have been close to double digits. It had to have been close.
Okay, here's how this all came about. So we saw the movie at Village Six the one time,
Yeah.
and then I'm a pretty cheap guy sometimes. So the movie, so the movie goes, so the movie goes to movies 10 within a few weeks down the road or something like that. It wasn't a huge hit, so it lasted theaters a couple weeks, few weeks or something like that in the first run theater. And then it's in the middle of summer. So I mean, like, if you're not making huge money in the middle of summer, you go to the second run theater pretty fast.
Yep.
And so it ended up over at movies 10 pretty fast. And what happened was, I decide that I'm going to drag people that have no desire to really see the film to this movie. And so I bring my mom, who will see any movie, but she just didn't happen to see this one. She likes this movie, but my mom, my dad, who really probably didn't really want
Right.
to go, and my brother, who's like 7 years old at the time. He loves Mike Myers. But I mean, at the time, he was probably like, I would rather play with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or something like that. And so I drag all these people. I dragged them to the movie one time, and that was after I brought my boom box down to the kitchen and played the entire soundtrack and sang it and did all the poems for them. So they knew all the poetry going into the movie, like a psychotic, and it was really kind of sad, and so I did all that, and then I took those guys, I took another friend, but what really happened was I'm 16 years old, I'm going on 17, close to it, later that year, and my mom was like, it's time to get a little job. Just nothing major, just a little job. I said, "Well, that's a good idea, Ma." And so what happened was I would tell my mom that I was going out hunting for jobs, and and listen, this is not a lie. Like my mom listens to this podcast, so this is not a lie. I did go looking for jobs. It's true. I would eventually get one, but here's the thing. I would fill out I'd tell her I'd maybe filled out 6 applications a day, and it was really like a grueling process. And in reality, I would go fill out 1 application, maybe 2, and then I'd go see this movie at Movies 10 for $1. And I did this for the movie played at at Movies 10 for a while because it was pretty popular there.
Oh my God.
I saw this movie 9 times. 9 times I did this. 9 times I saw this movie at Movies 10 for $1. So I saw the movie 10 times, and the first time we probably got in for $4 or whatever. And
it was like 425 or 475, something like that.
$54. It was not that. It's not that expensive.
Oh my God!
But I saw the movie for $1 at Movies 10, and at that point, I really did need a job. So, and I got a job working at Papa John's, handing out coupons.
Oh, that is right.
In the middle of the heat. That's my first job.
Oh God, those are the worst. I don't think they do that anymore. But first off, it's a great job for any teenager because it's going to teach you responsibility. You have to overcome the odds of near death and how hot it is.
Right.
So it's good preparation for life. I don't know if they do that anymore because we have online stuff. So maybe it doesn't matter. But
and they send through the mail a lot these days too. But
yeah.
That was what that's how I saw that movie 10 times at the theater.
I did not know that part.
It's pretty crazy.
It's go ahead.
No, I mean, and then it took a while for our friends to really kind of hop on board this film.
Yep.
I mean, I remember you remember Devin.
Yep.
I remember Devin getting into my car and saying, "Why do you like So I Married an Axe Murderer?" It's like, and I go, "Do you want me to kick you out of my car? Would you appreciate that? Like are you asking to walk? I mean, because if you make fun of that movie, you're begging to walk. You know?
So we gotta say because Tony in our friend group was one of the first guys that could drive.
Right.
There were some rules to riding with Tony,
I'm a
and if you,
non-smoker. First of all,
yeah, that is correct.
I'm
That
a
is
non.
absolutely correct.
So you weren't allowed to smoke in the car because I mean I can't.
That's correct.
I didn't really want to breathe all that.
All right.
So that was part of it as well. And every once in a while, I'd let somebody, roll down a window or something like that. But I mean, not very often. I tried not to
Yeah.
do it.
And if
But
you're an a-hole, you would
yeah,
get kicked.
I did. I mean, we did it to Wade one time. I mean, I did. I've
Yep.
done it. I've done it to folks here and there. If you were a jerk, and you were not part of what we were, the aura of what we were doing in the car,
Yep.
you got booted. I mean, that's the
Yep.
way. And I don't feel badly about it. I still don't feel badly about it, to be honest with you.
Before anybody fires off at us, understand like anybody that got booted was typically booted somewhere where they were by a house or something.
Right.
It wasn't like
They
they
were
were
close.
booted. Yeah.
Yeah, they had to walk. I think Wade had to walk a couple blocks,
Yeah, it wasn't far. He had to go to his house. Like it
yeah,
wasn't a thing.
and it dropped him in his neighborhood.
Yeah, that is correct.
His
That is
neighborhood was
correct.
big. There was a big neighborhood. That was
Yeah,
yeah.
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 We
And
walked that neighborhood anyway. It didn't really matter. We were going to do that either way. So it's not a thing.
but yeah, I mean, but I remember, and then Devin would come back and he'd say, once you listen to this soundtrack and see this movie, like this soundtrack is better once you see the movie,
Right.
and people started coming on board. So once the movie comes out, and then they start getting it on VHS and stuff like that, because
Yep.
it was before DVD.
Yep.
They just started watching on VHS. Then everyone starts like becomes a big thing. Everyone in our friend group starts to like the movie, and it becomes kind of trendier at the time.
It becomes a big part. I remember Catherine King seeing it and like her falling in love with the movie
Right.
because again, a lot of us loved it. Some of the dudes didn't care so much, but some of us that were a little bit more on the arty side of things, and Catherine was one of those, but like we ended up liking it for the poetry side of stuff. And so again, because that poetry stuff started, it became part of, and look, me and Tony spearheaded it because we were the two knuckle turds that saw it and brought it to everybody else. But as it started going through, it became much more, it was almost like it was, as our little group, it was a group level of cult status.
Right. Absolutely.
And then if you wanted to remain part of the group, just like now, you see it happen with all this other stuff. Like it's just how high school kids work, or teenagers rather. You had to know the movie because we were going to talk about it and make references, and you don't want to be left out. And so eventually, it just everyone fell into it, and I mean, it became a part of our. It was a big part of our friend group for a number of years, all the way through high school. I'd argue, at least to graduating. I would say it was part of it all the way through.
Absolutely. Without question. So there's a story. I'm going to tell it anyway because I mean it doesn't. It's ridiculous, but it's ridiculous. But do you remember the little bet Catherine and I had?
I remember there being a bet. I don't remember what it was. No.
All right. So I don't know why this happened at the movie theater, but it did.
Oh, I got it. Yeah.
You know what
Go
happened?
ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure why this happened, but the print that I saw 8,000 times in the movie theater, okay, it skipped one little line in this movie.
Yep.
It was really bizarre. It would like have a glitch in this one little spot, and it's the spot where they're making fun of Heed, and Anthony Paolio's on the couch and all that stuff, and he's talking about in Stuart McKenzie's talking about his head, and he makes a comment about it's quite pointy in parts. It's got he says that whole bit. Well, I'd never heard that line until VHS.
Yeah.
Never heard it, and she watched it on VHS before I did.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it 1,000 times. It's not a big deal, and so she makes this comment about this line, how much she likes it. And I was like, well, that's not in the movie. And she goes, yeah, no, it is. And I said, no, it's can't. I mean, I've seen it 800,000 times to your one. It can't possibly be there. And you know my recall. I mean, I'm doing this podcast 30 something years later. You know my recall for all these stories and how this works. So nobody usually challenges me on any of this stuff. And
Right.
so I'm getting challenged and I'm digging in. You know, I'm digging in because that's how I am. I'm kind of stubborn that way sometimes. And I'm digging in. And I said no, you're wrong. It's not correct. And she said, no, you want to bet? I said sure, I'll bet. What do you want? And she goes, if I'm correct, I get to paint your nails, my fingernails. Now
Yeah, that's right.
the key thing here is I have very nice fingernails, and I don't always cut them right away, so they get kind of not super long, but they get kind of long sometimes, and
Yeah.
they're very strong. And girls, this is really weird sounding, but girls love my fingernails. They love them. They're jealous because they're so strong and they look good. My mom tells me that all the time. I had girls I date all the time say this about my fingernails. So she wanted to paint them, and I was like, if you're right about this line, I was so positive that there's no way I'm wrong about this. And so we watched the movie, and it's at her house. She turns it on. We watch the film. That damn line is there, and I'm like, I looked over at you, and you were there, and I said, how is it we never heard this line? I go, because I've seen the movie 600,000 times. And you're like, I don't know. I was like, it's skipped. Like there's a skip, there's a glitch at the theater that didn't allow me to see this line. So I got my fingernails painted. It was like kind of a just just a little bit off clear. It wasn't it wasn't a bad color, but
Yeah.
nowadays it's pretty common. Guys get their fingernails painted all the time. So
Yeah,
it's
you were
not,
ahead of your time. You were ahead of
ahead
the
of my
game.
time.
Yeah, listen, I'm telling you, but that's an example of how much it was part. I mean, it was a part of our lexicon. It was a part of our conversation. It was a big deal because it was so. Look, I don't know all of the reasons why because I can't go back and remember being 14. I can remember the feeling of being 14, but I can't remember all the things they were going through. But I can certainly say that So I Married an Axe Murderer, as I've mentioned, a lot of pieces of my life come from that movie. And I think one part of it was, or multiple parts, but one big part of it was that was something that you and I found together. That was our thing, not just
Yeah.
seeing a movie. That was our soundtrack. That was our movie. We saw it together. We both had interest in filmmaking, maybe not to where we eventually got. It wasn't probably that budded yet, but we had this desire for it. We understood it. We both liked the idea behind it. I think we both were I think we're both very romantic dudes, not with each other. But we
Sometimes.
sometimes. But we both have like we're what is it, hopeless romantics. We're somewhat
Right.
hopeless romantics. We both like rom-coms.
Yep.
I think so much of that film, the reason it resonated with us and then our other friend group, but specifically with you and I, is the fact that like it was ours. That was, and it still is. It will never go away. That is our movie. It's as if we made the damn thing. You were an acolyte for it. I still am to some extent, right? I mean, we truly believed that that movie was, and it did. It influenced us. It. I don't know about you, but I think as I grew older, when I got to be a little bit older, I always wanted my dating life to be like what they had. They had like the perfect dating life where you could be that playful. It didn't work out that way because that's a Hollywood thing. Like I've never had a relationship be that playful and work out so well. But it was that. It was this level of there's so much about it that just stuck with us. What's your take on that side of things? I mean, is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with vastly everything you said without question. I mean, it's pretty much dead on. I became rather obsessed with Nancy Travis off this movie, and I liked a lot of the stuff she was in before. Like I loved Air America and 3 Minute a Baby and 3 Minute a Little Late, like all the stuff she would do. But she was in a ton of movies. But this was the movie. Like I thought she was so gorgeous. Like her makeup in this is so amazing, and every scene to scene, she just looks so beautiful. Like that's I wanted. I very much wanted to date women that kind of had that look
Yeah.
a lot of
Oh
times
yeah.
too. Yeah. So I mean, 100%. I mean, just taking that a little bit further, but I mean, she was so gorgeous, and I after that, I mean, I'd see everything she was in, of course. If it starred her, yeah, I'd watch it. It didn't matter what it was. But yeah, I mean, she was amazing, and everything you said about this movie, I 100% agree with. And I'd work with people from the film. Like I worked with Michael Haggerty,
Yep.
who's in the scene with Michael Richards. He's the guy who's supposed to be giving Michael Richards, giving him a ride. And and I worked with a few years back. I worked with the costume designer from this movie,
Oh,
and
incredible.
well, had to talk about this film, of course. And so I'd work with various people here and there from this film, and it was always it's always a pleasure to get to do that, because it's such an iconic movie. They're always kind of like, well, whatever, because they're like, yeah, they don't care. It's just something they did. But I
Yeah.
will always, wow, even today, even after being in the business for 25 years, I'm still kind of like, you worked on Soy Mary and Axwer? Like that's
Right.
the movie.
Right. I
So
I
yeah, it
remember.
fits into
Go
that
ahead.
whole.
At one portion of our lives, I think my mom started it, maybe, and then your mom did it. But we were taking these vitamins called Shackley.
Yeah, yeah,
Now, there's a lot of
right.
stories that come from Shackley. Most of them have to do with bodily situations. We don't need to go into those. However, my mom sold so much Shackley, she got invited to San
That's right.
Francisco on a
We had,
trip.
yeah,
Yeah. We got invited to San Francisco on a trip. So I'm stoked because this movie, Strawberry Naxmer, takes place in San Fran. It does an amazing job of showcasing San Francisco. I mean, it really does. Like, it is as romantic. I wouldn't probably say that's the situation now, maybe. I mean, San Fran people might say otherwise, but tough place to
back
live.
then. This is
But
back then.
back then, they
Back
make
then.
it look like the greatest city on earth. So I am just over the moon. I'm like, Tony, I'm going to San Francisco. Here's what's happening. We're going to Alcatraz, and I'm going to find Jack Kerouac Street. I'm, I'm
And I was also telling you at the time, I said, you got to find the Rhodes Coffee House
Rhodes Coffee House. That's correct.
because that's the coffee house that opens the movie, and that's where they are a lot of times in this film. Is at this coffee house, and I was like, you got to find Rhodes Coffee. We hadn't made a movie. None of us had made. Now we know the process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now we know what location managers do, and now we know that what production designers do, and what art departments do, and how they change all this stuff up. We didn't know it in 1993 as much. We're 16
No.
years old, 14 years old. We don't know the whole process, and I mean we're movie guys, but we don't necessarily know. You can't look this stuff up on the internet back then. So it's
No,
like
there's none of it's there.
we're just
But
we're just we're just winging it. So I'm like, go
but I
find all the things.
and I tried. And somewhere there's photographs of me wandering around. Seriously, I mean, my parents let me wander by myself. This is because it's a different era.
Find the shop. Find all this stuff. We got to find all these locations.
I went for it. And I remember asking multiple people if they'd ever heard of the Rhodes Coffee House. And this is pre-Google.
Not,
They're like, "No, I've never heard." I was like, "It's on Jack Kerouac Avenue. It's right there on." And they're like, "There is no Jack Kerouac Avenue." It's like, "Yes, there is. I saw it in a movie." Like, I am so convinced. Well, listen, where they told me to go is where this street was shot. Is not safe for young people. It was. It was not a good area.
I remember this photo very vividly.
And I snuck that shot. I got it as best I could. It was not necessarily the area for a 14, 15, 16. You need to at least be 18 to be in this area. Not because of anything more than it's actually where, if I remember what I was told, that area was where a lot of like artistic stuff was done, which is great. Where a lot of creativity came from, but it was all fueled by drugs. It was literally the drug haven is
It
the
was like,
corner they
like
used.
the beat area,
Yep.
where that's kind of been more run down because of what beats were about. It's different times.
Exactly right. It's exactly right. And the best part was, we know now as locations people, they picked it because it was cheap and they didn't have to pay off the dadgum city. Now that we understand, but they picked it. A lot of movies are shot in very rough areas because it's cheaper to film there because they don't have to pay off as many bills. So yeah, so funny story about it at the end of the day is I'm wandering around San Francisco looking for imaginary places because we love that movie so much.
Classic story.
We go to Alcatraz. I've done the whole thing. I probably, if there would have been camera phones in that time, you would have seen me reciting the entire speech by Vicky. Like I did the whole thing. So it was very, that's just how influential it was. I was willing to risk my own life, apparently, to go find streets that didn't even exist. Just, we cared about it, man. It was everything.
Easy to be like, no, I'm not running through San Francisco looking for anything.
No, nope. I'm not even gonna mess with it. So as you guys and gals and folks have now heard, that is like the stories, and I'm sure there's other parts, there's other bits, but that is kind of the core of this podcast, to be honest with you. Tony said it in the beginning, and he's absolutely right. I mean, this show, in our spreadsheet that we used, it helps guide us notes. It's called Simp because we originally were going to call it So I Married a Podcast. And we moved it to something else because we were like, well, look, I don't want people to think it's going to be, the internet is very boxy. And if we make it sound like it's a Back to the Future podcast, so we were very conscious of our title, or if we make it sound like So I Married an Axe Murderer podcast, that we're only going to talk about So I Married an Axe Murder for 30-something episodes, we could probably bullshit our way through it, but I don't know how good it would be at some point. The birth of the show, and really, I would say, as you've said in other episodes, really the foundation of our friendship was laid early on, but this was like, this is what built the house. This movie built our house. And for us to be friends, I mean, where are we at now? How many years is it? Some ungodly 30-something years?
5 years, bro.
35 years off of basically one movie is insane.
So what would you real quick, because I know we're getting to the end here. What would you consider your favorite scene in this movie?
Dude, it's tough. I have two.
A couple. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, the first time Harriet comes over to meet the family, I adore that scene a lot. There's a lot in there, and the pace of this movie is a little bit odd because it's so rom-com and then becomes a thriller. It's so interesting, like it's in that scene that it happens. But I love the awkwardness. I love everything that happens right before and right after. So I would say that sequence. I also look. I don't know anybody that doesn't say "pipe her down," so it has to be the wedding scene. It has to be. There's no way around it. For me,
those are great. I mean, they're up there for me too. I mean, I could easily say that. I'm gonna give two different ones just because it'll just be for fun that we give two different ones. But I'm gonna go with I love the montage at the butcher shop.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Because I think that's ideally, like, when you're thinking about Hollywood relationships and what you ideal, that's how
That's a great point.
How it probably should be.
Yeah.
But it isn't, but yeah. I mean, that's how it should be between a couple, but it's not. But I mean, that would be fun if it were. So that's kind of one of those scenes I really
great
like.
Thought.
And then the other one, what I would say is just about anything inside the I love the scene with Ralph.
Oh yeah.
Her friend.
Yeah.
That whole bit and that whole stuff, all the awkward bits with Amanda Plummer as well.
Oh yeah.
And where she names all the breakfast foods that he ends up. Yeah, I mean, it's great.
Do you know, to this day, it's funny you say that. To this day, I will do that to the kids. I'll come in seriously on a Saturday morning. I was like, I'll just make up stuff, but it's like, how about French toast with crispy bacon and fresh squeezed orange juice, and I'll even put some whipped cream on the side, and they're like, "Yeah, that sounds great." And then I bring them cereal. I do it all the damn time. I can't help it. I love
Classic.
it.
I love those scenes. I love the stuff that happens inside the police station.
Oh yeah.
Alias and Ark and stuff. I love. It's yeah. I love the honeymoon suite
Yep.
and all that. And it's just like all that stuff's really just quite magical. I ended up with a bunch of movie posters from this movie from various places. Of course, we got one of them at Movie Gallery up the street.
Oh
The
yeah, that's a windy story.
her in the red dress.
Yep.
Then I got the iconic theatrical poster that's front on the front cover of the soundtrack as well. So yeah, I mean it's great, man. Yeah. So all those scenes we talked about. If you haven't seen the movie, this is the pick of the week,
Yeah,
obviously,
easily.
and
Pick
it's
of
to
the
be the
show.
soundtrack of the week too.
Oh, for sure. I like I said at the very beginning, it is very difficult to find streaming, but I'm sure you can go find it. You can buy it for like $4. It's worth it. If you're hesitant on that side of things, I don't even think it's a rental. You're probably better off to
They have
go
an anniversary.
look.
They have because this became a cult classic. They have anniversary editions of. I think you even have one. They have
Yep.
anniversary editions of this movie, so they have like a little bit more. They have some stuff, some deleted. I mean, not deleted scenes, but they have like other commentary and things like that that you can get now.
Yeah, and they made a 4K print for those people that have like 4K Blu-ray and all that kind of stuff. They made a nice version of it that you can find on that actually is pretty good. It's a good print. Sometimes when they make these up reses from older movies, they don't do a great job. They did a good job with this one. It's not the best, but it's not awful. It's still very very watchable. But yeah, I would highly recommend it if you've not seen it. It's a fun movie. It's pretty safe. There's nothing really major in it. There's a suggestive sexual sequence, but there's no nudity and there's no like humping
His
or
butt,
anything kind of wild. Yeah,
his butt.
yeah, his butt. Yeah, his butt is shown.
That's
Yeah,
it. It's
yeah,
a great scene though, but his butt does show. That's it.
yeah, yeah. And it is squarely a PG-13 movie. I don't even know if there's an F bomb in it. I can't remember if there's even an F bomb. I don't think there is.
The language is good. I mean, you can watch it with your kids. It's a great film. I mean, if you can get it for a few bucks, and you just want to add it to your collection. I mean, obviously, I've watched it 800 billion times, and Drew's here. I don't even know what your count is, but I know you watch it over the course of time.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So yeah, so there it is. That's the episode of episodes. Probably the beefiest episode we'll drop on this show. We try and keep it to a certain amount of time, and we did that. So if you haven't followed us, make sure you do. We're all over the social media side. I think it'd be very smart for you to join the Facebook group because I'm sure there's a lot of times what happens is we find cool stuff and Tony posts it inside of that group. Or even if I come across something, I get it to him and he posts it. But if you haven't joined the Facebook group, we just found it easier to post stuff there than anywhere else. And listen, we get the feedback we get has been tremendous. I mentioned the Jack the Bear VHS from a listener. Look, they found it on their own means and they were very complimentary. It was very nice to read that. We love seeing that stuff and love having the feedback. I guess with that, Tony, is there anything else you want to say? And I'll let you close the show.
No, that's it pretty much. I mean, this is the movie of all movies. I'm glad we got to do this episode. This was kind of the episode that like I said, we wanted to do before we decided to do the podcast, and I'm grateful we got to do it. It's kind of more of a situation now that we get to add this to our lexicon of So I Married an Axe Murderer stuff between you and I, which I'm even more grateful for that because it's been so many years since we've really gotten to add a So I Married an Axe Murderer piece to the friendship that this was kind of a really nice way to get to do it. We had tried a couple of years ago, and I'm just going to bring this up really quick. A couple of years ago to watch the Pantera, and I had come up with the whole idea. I was like, well, I'll drive down to Mobile. We'll watch Sawyer and Axmer. Then we'll watch the Pantera on the evil Netflix that I can't stand. And I was willing to do it. And so we were going to do that, but life happens and things happen, and we weren't able to get together for it. And so I watched the Pantera on my own, which is supposedly when you watch the movie, he talks about the Pantera a lot. Stuart McKinley talks about this a lot. So they released this thing on Netflix, that was like a 6 episode arc for the Pantera, and it kind of ties into So I Married an Axe Murderer in the loosest of ways, and it has none of the charm. You do get to see Mike Myers play several characters, and there are some good cameos, and that stuff's cool. And if you like that stuff, give it a watch. But it gets highly political, and it gets high. It's a sign of the times, and I get it, but it loses all of its innocence, and it's not as good.
No, definitely not. I agree. I didn't care for it myself.
And that's it.
All right. Well, thank you again for listening, watching, and however you're consuming this. And we will see you on the very next episode. Out.